What's up, guys? We're back. It's Ryan Allred here with Pro Play Games. I'm going to be doing a deck profile for you guys on Pikachu Zekrom GX. I played it this weekend at 2 cups, and I won both of them. So I'm pretty happy with the deck. Just a quick, before I dig deep into the deck, if you're already kind of familiar with it, this version is playing Jirachis and Judge. So that kind of makes the counts make a lot more sense as you're looking about it if you've seen other lists. This one's going to be based around that, so that's why some of the counts are the way they are. But we'll just go ahead and start digging in. So our main attacker here is Pikachu Zekrom GX. We play 2 of them because that needs to be your first attack of the game. Sometimes there are weird kind of plays you can do where you do something different, but most of the time we're just trying to do full blitz to start the game off. If you go second, if you can do it turn 1, that's great. Otherwise, you're really just trying to get it by turn 2. Our big hitter is Raichu, Alolan Raichu GX. That's new to Unified Mind, so it's new to this season. He has a damage cap of 250 with the GX attack, plus all the Electro Power, so this is the easiest way to knock out another Tag Team GX Pokemon without putting a whole lot of work in. So usually, against a big Tag Team deck, our game plan is to full blitz and full blitz onto the Raichu, so that we're set up to take a big knockout the next turn. If you're playing against like a non-GX deck, like Malamar or something, you're really not supposed to use Raichu. He's not going to do you a whole lot of good there. Zorora GX is kind of a mix between support and an attacker. We're mostly playing him for the ability. The ability lets you retreat for free if you have an electric attached, so that's really big. But another nice perk about him is that he's not a tag team, so he only gives up 2 prizes, and he still does 160 with his attack. So it's actually a really good attacker to use too. Our last main attacker here is Eelektross, and Eelektross is weird. Eelektross is cool. I love this card. So it's not a basic Pokemon. That's honestly my favorite thing about the card, is just that it's not a basic. That means that it's not going to be the Pokemon you have to start at the beginning of the game, but the ability lets you put it into play without having to play any of the other evolutions, as long as you have at least 4 energy in play. And when you play him down that way, you can also move as many energy to him as you want, which is perfect because the attack costs 4 energy. He has 150 health, which is really beefy for a non-GX Pokemon, and the attack does 130 damage, with an additional effect that the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So unless your opponent plays a switch, if you hit them with that, you're knocking them out the next turn. It's really big against Keldeo GX, because generally they either don't play a lot of switch or they don't have a lot of ways to search it. So usually Eelektross is going to take the knockout because they can't knock him out back. The other kind of option for this slot is Hoopa. We're not playing into the deck, but I'll show you real quick. Hoopa is just kind of like a bad version of Eelektross, to be honest. So the health, Hoopa has 20 less health, but he resists Psychic. So against a Psychic Pokemon, they're equal on health, but against everything else, Eelektross wins. The attacks, this does 130. This attack does 10 plus 20 for every guy with abilities. So if they have 6 Pokemon in play, it does 130. So Eelektross always does the damage cap of him. The only real difference between Eelektross and Hoopa is that Eelektross takes 4 energies to attack, but you don't have to actually attach any of them. Once they're in play, you just drop him and he gets all the energy down. That's really the only big difference, and that he's not a basic, which is great. So Hoopa can be worth playing if there are a lot of Malamar in your area, just because Hoopa is still great against Malamar, because you can use it like turn 2, turn 3 or something. But Eelektross serves the same purpose as Hoopa, while also being a great answer to so many other decks. And again, it's not a basic, so it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't hurt you. Hoopa hurts your consistency by playing it. Still could be worth it. It might be worth playing both. You might have to cut something to play both, but I really like the Eel in here. Anyway, back to the core of the deck. We're playing Tapu Koko Prism. This is how we get all of our energy in play. The ability, if you have 1 or 2 electric in your discard, then you can send them to the Lost Zone and put those on your bench. Our consistency cards, we're playing 2 Dedenne GX. We're only playing 2. I've seen some lists play 3, but the problem is bench space is such a big issue when you're playing Jirachi that usually you can't play the Dedenne even if you want to. So for that reason, there are just other cards I'd rather play to help my consistency. For example, Jirachi. We're playing 4 copies of Jirachi because starting Jirachi is huge. That's how we can hit the turn 1 Judge going first. And it also just helps us after we get knocked out. After you get knocked out, if you have a Jirachi with a skateboard on him, you're going to be set up for the next turn. You're going to get whatever you needed, because that's going to be one of the puzzle pieces you need almost guaranteed. So those are our Pokemon. Looking at our supporter lineup, we play 4 copies of Volkner because this card is insane. I would play more than 4 if I could, but obviously you're not allowed to. He searches one of your item cards and electric energy. This is kind of like a combo puzzle piece type deck. Or I guess like it's like trying to find a straight in poker, you know? And this guy's basically a wild card. You'll find like 3 of the puzzle pieces you need, and this is a wild card to make sure whichever one you're missing, you're going to get it. Other than that, we're playing 3 copies of Judge and 1 Cynthia. The Judges are great turn 1, and then after that they kind of suck. But every other supporter also kind of sucks, so we got to play something. I like Judges because they're great for disruption. They help out a lot because this is, I would say, the most consistent deck in the format right now. So by making sure the other decks have to suffer for being inconsistent, that's where Judge helps you. The other decks are more explosive. If they set up and you set up, you're going to lose. So your goal is to set up and make sure they don't. But then 1 copy of Cynthia, just because later game, you'll be much happier to draw into a Cynthia than a Judge. And the turn 1 Judge is pretty likely with all of our Jirachis and everything. And this Pokemon lineup is a little thinner. We're only playing 1 Zorora and only 1 Raichu, just because that's all you really need. You don't need to attack more than that. And we have so many ways to search them. Like 4 Electromagnetic Radar, 1 Cherish Ball, and 2 Pokemon Communications. These are really just consistency cards. The Pokecoms are pretty much defined as Tapu Koko Prism, because if we can get that turn 1, that's huge. But our Electromagnetic Radars and Cherish Balls are just to get us to Dene and Pikachu Zekrom turn 1 so we can full blitz. The obvious cards, we're playing 4 copies of Custom Catcher, 4 copies of Electro Power. This is how we deal a lot of damage. This is how we pull guys off the bench. Your first deck search, this needs to be one of your first searches so you know how many you've prized. Obviously, also check for your Prism cards. For switching cards, 3 Switch, 2 Skateboard. That's really all you need. Switch is cool once you have a Jirachi in play later in the game, because Switch ends up being like a trainer's mail, basically. Because you can switch into the Jirachi, use the ability, find a trainer, and then retreat back. Or if you have an energy on the guy, you can retreat, Stellar Wish, and then use the Switch. So you don't necessarily need the skateboard on the Jirachi. For energy switching cards, we have 1 Tag Switch and 2 Energy Switch. This is a very light count. You really can't make massive plays with that. If you put your energy from Full Blitz on the wrong Pokemon, you kind of screwed yourself. So by playing such low counts, you have to play smart and you have to plan ahead on where that attack's going to come from. That's kind of the only downside to it. But once you're really good with the deck, honestly, you don't need these. These cards will really only be to set up the turn 1 Full Blitz off of a Koko Prism. After that, these cards are mostly dead, as long as you planned your attacks correctly. We also play 2 copies of Reset Stamp. This is a Dedenne engine, which means that turn 1, turn 2, especially turn 1, we're discarding cards we don't want to. So if we only play 1 of these, there's a good chance we have to discard it turn 1, and then later on in the game when we need it, it's already gone. Against a deck like Reshizard, Reset Stamp is basically your win condition. So if you don't have that in the deck anymore, there's a good chance you're going to lose. Just because if they Welder twice and you can't Reset Stamp them after the knockout, you're done. We're playing 1 copy of Stadium Nav. This essentially lets us Volkner for a stadium. It's a double coin flip, so sometimes you miss, but usually you'll hit it. 75% of the time. For stadiums, we're playing 2 Lysander Labs and 1 Thunder Mountain Prism. The Thunder Mountain Prism's cool because it lets us attack early. Honestly, most of the time it's not that great. It's not as impressive as it sounds, just because with Full Blitz, usually you have so much energy on the board that you're not reaching for that last energy. It's mostly an early game thing, but it's one of the first things you want to search for. We play 2 copies of Lysander Labs because that's your only win condition against Guardian. So if you don't play Lysander Labs, you just take that loss. And if you don't play at least 2, you basically auto-lose that matchup. Even with 2, it's not like a amazing matchup. I think it's still a little favorable, but this is the only way you can win. So this lets us win against Guardian, this lets us win against Keldeo. Power plants are cool, but with power plants, that lets you beat Keldeo, but you still don't have a way to beat Guardian. This combination is the only way you can beat both. That's why I play them. We also have 11 electric energies, this many. That's pretty standard in the deck. Some people have either bumped it up by one or bumped it down by one. You'll probably use every single energy in your deck, so having one extra is not a terrible idea, but there are just so many other cards I want more. This is the kind of deck with Volkner that you really wish you could have 65 cards. I know every deck's kind of like that, but with Volkner, there are just so many little one-ups and techs that you'd love to be able to put in here that you can't. This was the deck, like I said. I feel like it has a really good matchups across the board. It doesn't have anything super unfavorable. This can beat anything, and it also just is the most consistent. It's gonna set up very, very frequently, and if your opponent judges you turn one, you're still probably gonna be fine, really, especially if you open the Jirachi. I really like it. This is what I'm looking at for Atlantic City. I might make a change or two, but honestly, there's a good chance this will be my 60-card list. So let me know what you guys think. Once again, this is brought to you by Pro Play Games and Ultra Pro. You should be seeing a lot more content from us in the future, and thanks for giving us a watch.